I know you can't be tired.
What's good, people? Welcome back to the channel. So we have a juicy episode today. I'm going to run you through my current PED stack. We're going to get through that later on, but for now, brief little update. We're now just under 10 weeks out, so into the single digits, 9 weeks out and 5 days. Today is Tuesday. First update of the week. Yesterday was delts and arms, and I did have a bit of a shoulder injury, so these things will happen on prep. We'll manage this. We're going to take a 3-day deload, today being the first deload, tomorrow being another additional rest day, and then Thursday is my usual rest day anyway, so we'll see how things go leading up until that. Supplements have been increased, curcumin and joined in, going in there to again make sure that we recover, and then hopefully on Friday we will be back in for an arms and delt session, which we will have some better quality videography. Joe is going to be taking those, so you know, it's not just going to be straight up tripod static videos. We're going to get a bit of a nice little montage. But yeah, that is all still to come. I've updated my timeline sheet here, which you would have seen a snippet on towards the tail end of my last video, and that is how we're going to do things moving forward. I will go through that towards the end of each video. Again, run through of all my macros for each of those days, where all of my drugs have been for that week, cardio being done each day and so on, and also where weight has been. So I've spent the last while, you know, updating that, putting in previous high days, refeed days, and we will go through all that later on, along with the PEDs, the exciting stuff. That's essentially it. I'll get back to you on Friday with visual update, and again, shoulder, if we get the all clear to go train. Might be some escalations this week, but again, all to be seen. Also, just throwing this out there now, have had a good bit of very positive feedback. A lot of people saying they're enjoying the videos. Please do put any likes, comments in below, share on your Instagram story. Really enjoying this, you know, documenting the process, giving you guys as much insight as possible, and all of the feedback is very much so appreciated. Stay tuned. Yes, people, what's good? So we are on our way down now. Leg session coming up. I know we mentioned in the previous clip that was going to be arms. Done delts and arms yesterday. Now we just done arms. Zach said to leave the delts portion out of it, so I went down, trained fasted. Very good session. It wouldn't have been a very long session or too interesting, so gonna head down now, bring my tripod, get a few clips in here. Gonna run you through a good bit of my like warm-up stuff and hopefully talk through it either in the gym or a voiceover afterwards. Feeling very good. Body has decided to just skip the 106s. We dropped from 107.2 yesterday to 105.8, so big pull off there after a little bit of a fluctuation during the week, which I'll explain in the pre-recorded clip to come after training. But yeah guys, that is us. See you down there, pre-going in. Also got a pretty strong feeling this is going to be a very good leg session. We got my cardio done this morning on the bike instead, so my legs are pretty much pumped as fuck already. We're gonna head down, get this session in. Yes guys, so as mentioned, we're going to do a voiceover here for this session. Starting off with the warm-up, we are doing an around the clock stretch. Essentially, you're just going to set yourself up in a lunge position. I like to use a foam block there on your knee, and just make sure you have something resting against the inside of your ankle. Essentially what we're looking through here is hip extension and internal rotation, okay? Because typically what will happen here is your foot will want to, you know, your heel will want to fall inwards, your hips going through external rotation. We want to make sure that is stabilized, and then just pushing forward into a lunge position. You'll see me gradually moving my knee further and further across my body, again exacerbating and testing that level of internal rotation. Putting your hand, you know, maybe in there behind the knee just to keep that stable, and keeping that front heel down so that you're also stretching out your calf on your lead leg. Next of all, we're into these walks. Nice bunda there. I drew a blank there and forgot the name of them. It is a sprinter's pose, walking lunge, hip airplane kind of trifecta. Essentially what we're doing here is, you know, taking a step forward, getting into a lunge position, pushing forward off that lead leg, getting your hip up as high as possible, again managing internal stabilization through that standing leg, trying to keep that back leg straight, going into a single leg RDL, and then opening up to the side. So again, we're kind of trying to create as much internal stabilization here as possible by going through that hip adduction abduction movement and just taking those steps forward. You probably only need like 4 to 5 on each leg, taking these nice and slow. Try to open up as much as possible. Try to think about bringing your chest up to the wall, to the side of you. and then, you know, just building balance from there. What you could do is do these separately, like minus the hip airplane, and then maybe just like do that in a static position, hover your hand over maybe the back of a bench, maybe use like a wooden dowel to support yourself if needed. But obviously this would be the progression then of removing that tool so that you're just completely internally stabilized. Internally stabilized means we are controlling that ourselves. We're not reliant on machines to kind of keep us in there, because obviously that's the big issue that we see people arising with, just machine based stuff, and then we're not really creating any real level of stability there through ourselves. Now into our first working sets here, we have a seated hamstring curl, taking our hamstrings through a lengthened range of motion. You want to make sure that you're keeping your lower back in contact with that pad behind you. You see a lot of people arching up excessively, and keeping those ribs down. Okay, use your hands with that restraint to make sure you're locked in nice and tight, that your knee is in line with that pivot, the axis that everything's rotating around. And the main thing as well here to know is keeping that change of direction. You're not allowing the weight to kind of fling you straight back out of that hole at the bottom of each rep. Okay, really fighting for that. And then, you know, when it gets a little bit more difficult, when we can't control that, we're just getting it there by any means necessary. We become less strict with that pause. 3 sets here. I do a loading schema, which is, you know, 1 moderate set, 1 heavy set, and then 1 slightly lighter set for higher reps. After that, we're into a linear leg press, which here for me it's kind of hit or miss. Today was actually fine, last week wasn't great. We ran a few very consecutive progressive weeks on this beforehand, focusing on as much range of motion as possible. So I do have my hips elevated here, as you can see, under the foam blocks, to try and keep my feet down a little bit lower, because I'm a taller person. It's a relatively smaller leg press. A good cue here as well is like foot pressure, that you're pushing through the heel of your foot, the outside of your foot, and then your big toe, and then really controlling that eccentric, taking it as slow as possible, especially if you do have any, you know, underlying issues. You'll see that being a recurrent theme here with this leg session. I'm really divorcing myself from ego and just trying to keep the quality there as much as possible. 1 top set here, done 7 plates aside, and then back off 5 plates aside. I've done much heavier than this, but this is what's kind of working for me right now, and just being stricter with that quality of each rep. I actually noticed with my back off set here, taking the sleeves off was actually a little bit better, so I might take the sleeves off next week, or maybe even resort back to my single ply sleeves. After that, we had 3 sets of adductors. Lighting here is pretty shit, you get the gist of it. I've went through this in one of my last videos. You know, with setup, make sure you're taking this through a full range of motion. I also have my hips elevated here to try and keep my knees down lower. And yeah, there's 3 straight sets there. I think it was 10 to 15, and then, as mentioned, being really strict here with this leg extension, keeping this in a slightly higher rep range, controlling that tempo, maybe a little bit too much, but this is what I need to do to make sure that knee doesn't flare up. I have arthritis in my left knee. You'll see it here twitching like fuck, so I'm really just focusing on trying to keep a relatively even distribution of stimulus across each of these. If I'm complacent with my setup, with my execution, it's my right leg that just takes over, and then the gap between those just gets bigger and bigger. So again, just trying to make sure that isn't the case. Keeping yourself locked in nice and hard, using those handles to pull yourself down, and make sure we're taking that slight pause at the top of each rep also. And finally, we were into our single leg standing hamstring curl, and I'm just going to put my post-workout posing video over here, just a bit of a physique update as well along with this. So yeah, pretty happy with these. Going on the hamstring curl first, make sure that you're keeping your torso stable, that you're driving that thigh, that you're pushing through your glute, keeping that pelvis nice and stable so that you can load as much of that as possible. And like with the other leg curl variations, that we're keeping that pause at the top, you know what I mean, when it's most challenging. We're not just kind of flicking it and allowing it to pull us in and out of position. Happy with these. See a few glute lines coming through, maybe not as sharp through the obliques, but also I think this is like one of the few videos I put up like post leg workout, so there's going to be inflammation in that lower half. I did see a good bit more detail through the lower half this morning. It did seem, you know, a little bit more separated and striated through the quads, and then obviously the upper body here is pretty flat. We haven't done push or pull in over a week now actually, because we had our delts and arms session Monday, then we took 3 days off, then we had arms, and now legs. So upper body is going to be a little bit flatter here. So again, not taking that shit to heart, understanding contextually where that physique is, and yeah, just doing what we can now. Be back in for that session on Tuesday for ham's pull, and then push on Wednesday. Shoulder feels good. We've also added in TB500, so again, a little update, which is a peptide used for healing. Yeah, using that now and keeping some more on hand just in case anything else does pop up throughout this prep, because we still have another 9 weeks to go. For now, I'm going to run you through not just my current PEDs, but basically prep so far, everything that we have done. As I said, I updated that sheet. I'm going to put all of these updates here. So this will go through, you know, average weight. You can see exactly where my calories were for each of these days, where my food has been, obviously the drug side of things as well. Prior to prep, we ran that, I'd say TRT, but obviously it's more than TRT. We had 225 milligrams of test and 225 milligrams of masteron, which, you know, is a good stack for a lot of people who are like a couple of years in. For me, that would be like my reduced dosage. So we actually ran that for, I believe, 12 weeks. It was about 8 weeks prior to prep on that lower dosage, and in the first 4 weeks, essentially you're not going to need a lot of drugs to, you know, pull off excess body fat and to keep tissue there. As that diet increases, you may need more and more to, again, make sure that you are not just pulling the body fat off and keeping the tissue that's there, but potentially even, you know, recomp. And I think that has been the case in the first couple months in this prep. Obviously the body fat coming down makes the muscle mass look a lot more pronounced, but I do think there actually has been a little bit of tissue added, particularly arms, which have been such a weak point for me. So we'd ran 2 high days a week on those arm days. We use insulin on those days. We used 10 I used Atlantis, and I think it was 3 I used Nova pre and post workout to utilize the additional carbs that's been in there. And scrolling down here, you'll see that my average calories pretty much so far, and still hasn't really dipped below this, I've stayed above 3,500 calories, which is pretty sick. Obviously this week ran a few more days non-training day to, you know, compensate for that deload, so the average calories might be a little bit lower, but also expenditure being a little bit less. It is still only Friday, so I am going to update this tomorrow to see exactly where those weights have been over the next couple of days and fill those in. Hopefully we will hit a new low. We hit one during the week, 107.3. I know we were aiming for like the 106s, but to be honest, visuals are still improving, so I am quite happy with that. Obviously you want to see the scales move down, but it is important to remember, like, it's not the only factor. At the end of the day, it's bodybuilding. You want to make sure you're keeping the tissue there, or as I said, recomping and looking better at the same weight, ideally. That's been it so far. We've done 4 weeks on 450 milligrams. We've taken escalations throughout. We've added trenbolone in, and now we're at a total milligram of 1375. And I believe from Monday or Tuesday, we're pushing another 50 milligrams of Primo in there. So it'll be 1425, still under 1.5 grams at 9 weeks out, which is still pretty good, pretty moderate for, you know, someone of my size. That will probably top out around the 2 gram mark, and then maybe orals on top of that. We haven't had to use any orals thus far. It'll probably be, you know, Anavar coming in maybe 6 weeks out, and then something along the lines of Superdrol or Halo from the last 3 to 4 weeks. You want to reduce that time using orals, because obviously a high level of liver toxicity there. So really just in those last few weeks for that, you know, really cosmetic effect, that dry look. But yeah, that's pretty much been it. Very smooth sailing. You will see this week there was one day that my weight did shoot up quite a bit. That was the day after the injury, so again, potentially a little bit of inflammation there. And then also food volume, I think that day I subbed out some rice for potatoes, which again, calorically it's going to be pretty much the exact same, but when it comes to, you know, prep and keeping everything as consistent as possible, it's probably not something to do very regularly. I should just bin the rest of them. Even though I know calories and so on were equal, I don't really want that factor to be, you know, messing with my head, seeing the weight move up and starting to question things, even though I know logically that's not the case. So that is us, guys. 9 weeks out as of yesterday from when you are watching this. We started off our prep on 450 milligram total. We're now at 1375. Ancillaries that have been in there throughout, again, making sure health and so on is where it should be. We've ran 150 micrograms of T4, which is slightly above, you know, basal replacement dosages, but based off blood work, that's what I needed, so we've kept that consistent. We haven't needed to add in T3 yet. There's obviously no down regulation there. It may be something to add in a few weeks time. We've kept metformin in there at 1000 milligram and telmisartan in there at 80 milligram. Again, keeping blood pressure, blood glucose, stomach, GI function exactly where it should be. Yeah, that is essentially it. I reckon food will be reduced next week, so from there I'll run you through my updated diet in next week's video and any other adjustments we have to the plan. As mentioned earlier, guys, any support, likes, comments, shares, sharing on Instagram is very much so appreciated, and anything else you do want to see, either drop me a DM, pop it down below, and I will be sure to cover that in coming videos. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.